Hello everyone, welcome back to another lesson with Rivera Fine Art Studios. Today I wanted to talk about different ways of shading using different mediums. Okay, and if you've seen any of my previous videos on shading, I used this value scale to demonstrate how different pencils can create different darknesses of value. So if we start on the right over here, this is labeled P. Now this is actually just the white of the paper because the paper itself has a very light value tone. This second one here labeled T is a value that I created using a tortillon. Now what tortillons are, they look like this. They're telescoped pieces of just like a very soft pulp paper. And when you use them, typically you'll lay down some pencil. You'll just shade an area with pencil, and then you'll use this to rub over that area to smooth it out. When you use them, they get a little bit dirty. As you can see, this one is pretty dark at the tip right here. This is actually charcoal. I had used this for a charcoal drawing, so it's pretty dirty. But for this value here, I used a tortillon that just had a little bit of pencil on it. So it created a very, very light value. Okay, now for this value over here, the next one over, I used a 2B pencil. So there's B pencils and H pencils. B pencils are a little bit softer, and the range is from a B all the way up to, I believe, an 8B. In this case, I just went as dark as a 6B. But the 2B is fairly light, so I used just a little bit of pressure, and then I smoothed that out again with a tortillon. So it's a little bit darker than the value where I just used the tortillon by itself. This next value is just a little bit more pressure with the 2B pencil, and this next one is a little bit more. And for each of these, I blended them with a tortillon once I put down my initial layer. As I get even darker, now I'm switching over to the next darker B pencil, which is a 4B. And the reason I do that is because if I try to go too dark with the 2B, it will actually just get really shiny and really silvery looking, and I won't get that darkness that I'm looking for. So I have to switch over at a certain point. So this is the 4B with about medium pressure. Here is the 4B with, you could say, medium hard pressure. So you can see I'm starting to get pretty dark. And then for the really dark value over here, I used the 6B pencil. Now your range is somewhat limited using pencil. It works really nicely for the lighter values, but to get really rich darks, charcoal is much better. You can push your darker range much further using charcoal. So if we look at this scale over here, I use different types of charcoal. And the other thing that you will notice is the value. Let's look at this, for example, versus something like this. This is very gray. You could almost say a cooler gray versus this, which is warmer. This almost looks brown in comparison to that. So the type of charcoal you use can have an effect on the warm and the cool of that value. Okay, so I just want to start off by talking about these two values up here, and I'm just going to kind of work my way down this scale. So these two values were created using the Nitrem charcoal. Now the Nitrem charcoal is a very high quality charcoal. It's used in a lot of ateliers for drawings of plaster casts and even the human figure. Charcoal by nature is softer than pencil, so it creates a lot of excess powder. So what you see here is the charcoal almost at full pressure. So they created a pretty dark value, not quite as dark as this, which I'll explain in a little bit. And then over here, I used the Nitrem charcoal again, and I just rubbed the tortillon over it to make it a little bit lighter. So it smears and rubs around very easily, much more easily than the pencil. One thing you may notice is it has a tendency to look a little bit more grainy. It has a grainier quality to it for the fact that it is a softer medium. So you're getting less density in the value as you're laying it down. I think the other thing you'll notice is that the Nitram charcoal is warmer than really any other values I have here. So it's pretty much the warmest value that I have in any of these scales. I want to talk about what's the next value down here. So for the extreme darks, the darkest dark, now this is the closest thing to a black that I can get with the mediums that I'm using. This is actually compressed charcoal. The main difference between the compressed charcoal and the Nitram is the compressed is oil-based. It has an oil in it, so it changes the binding. It makes it a little bit waxier and much more permanent. So I can't correct as easily with the compressed charcoal. I can't erase it. But what I can do is get these extreme dark values. Now you can see there's a huge difference between that and the value right there using the 6B pencil. So I can push that dark range much further with the compressed charcoal. Over here, I have used the compressed charcoal once again, and I blended it with the tortillon. So you can see it's about the same as the value right here that I got with just the Nitram charcoal. However, it is cooler. You can see there's a difference. This is warmer versus that. Now, coming down here, I wanted to create an even cooler value tone. So I'm actually using the compressed charcoal, and I'm mixing a white charcoal pencil with it. So it creates more of a bluish gray. And this is simply a General's charcoal white pencil. Blends very nicely, so you can blend that with actual charcoal itself, and you can get into those cooler grays. Okay, so I just want to wrap this up by talking about ways to put this all together in an actual drawing. So I want to use this example here of a chocolate chip cookie, which I did back in 2016, and I'm just going to zoom in so we can get a closer look at this. So right away, we see that there's a very full range of values, both light and dark values, as well as warm and cool values. So if we look at the cookie, for example, the doughy part of the cookie, those values are pretty warm when we compare them to something like this cast shadow down here, which is sort of a cooler gray. We can also see that the darkest values are the chocolate chips. Those are pretty much solid black in some places, like particularly this one, which is in more shadow. So I separated my mediums based on what value I was trying to create. So for the chips, I used compressed charcoal. For the doughy part of the cookie, I used my 2B, 4B, and 6B pencils. For the cooler shadow, I used I actually used pencil, and then I blended that with the white charcoal pencil. And then just for a few extra areas where I had darker darks within the dough, where they had the very deep crevices, you can kind of see them throughout, I again used the compressed charcoal sharpened to a very fine point so I could get those fine, sharp lines. And just one other thing I want to mention, I typically don't combine charcoal and pencil. If you are going to combine them, as I did in this drawing, you want to make sure that you isolate the areas. So wherever you're using charcoal, you're not going to layer pencil over that, or vice versa. You're not going to layer charcoal over pencil or pencil over charcoal. And the reason being is that they both have a different quality. The pencil is, again, more silvery, more shiny. There's a little bit more glare when you see it in certain lights versus the charcoal, which is more matte. You get those more solid darks. You don't have that shininess. So if you know how to use them, you can combine them, but it can be tricky at times. So I would recommend using both pencil and charcoal, experimenting with them and with what you can do with the values. And then when you get comfortable with handling both mediums, certainly try finding ways to combine them. But that, again, is something that you just want to only do when you have experience with both mediums and understanding how those mediums work together. So that about wraps it up. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Stay tuned for another lesson with Rivera Fine Art Studios. And in the meantime, happy drawing and painting. Bye.